Section 14 of Essays of Schopenhauer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Essays of Schopenhauer by Arthur Schopenhauer, translated by Sarah Hay Dirks. Religion, a Dialogue, Part 2. Philalithes. I understand. The matter resolves itself into truth, putting on the dress of falsehood. But in doing so, it enters into a fatal alliance. What a dangerous weapon is given into the hands of those who have the authority to make use of falsehood as the vehicle of truth! If such is the case, I fear there will be more harm caused by the falsehood than good derived from the truth. If the allegory were admitted to be such, I should say nothing against it. But in that case it would be deprived of all respect, and consequently of all efficacy. Therefore the allegory must assert a claim, which it must maintain to be true in sensu proprio, while at the most it is true in sensu allegorico. Here lies the incurable mischief, the permanent evil, and therefore religion is always in conflict, and always will be, with the free and noble striving after pure truth. Demophiles. Indeed, no. Care has been taken to prevent that. If religion may not exactly admit its allegorical nature, it indicates it, at any rate, sufficiently. Philalithes. And in what way does it do that? Demophiles. In its mysteries. Mystery is at bottom only the theological terminus technicus for religious allegory. All religions have their mysteries. In reality, a mystery is a palpably absurd dogma which conceals in itself a lofty truth which by itself would be absolutely incomprehensible to the ordinary intelligence of the raw masses. The masses accept it in this disguise, on trust and faith, without allowing themselves to be led astray by its absurdity, which is palpable to them, and thereby they participate in the kernel of the matter so far as they are able. I may add, as an explanation, that the use of mystery has been attempted even in philosophy. For example, when Pascal, who was pietist, mathematician, and philosopher in one, says in this threefold character, God is everywhere centre and nowhere periphery. Malebranche has also truly remarked, La liberté est un mystère. One might go further and maintain that in religions everything is really mystery, for it is utterly impossible to impart truth in sensu proprio to the multitude in its crudity. It is only a mythical and allegorical reflection of it that can fall to its share and enlighten it. Naked truth must not appear before the eyes of the profane vulgar. It can only appear before them closely veiled. And it is for this reason that it is unfair to demand of a religion that it should be true in sensu proprio, and that en passant. Rationalists and supernaturalists of today are so absurd. They both start with the supposition that religion must be the truth, and while the former prove that it is not, the latter obstinately maintain that it is. Or rather, the former cut up and dress the allegory in such a way that it could be true in sensu proprio, but would in that case become a platitude. The latter wish to maintain, without further dressing, that it is true in sensu proprio, which, as they should know, can only be carried into execution by inquisitions and the stake. While in reality, myth and allegory are the essential elements of religion, but under the indispensable condition, because of the intellectual limitations of the great masses, that it supplies enough satisfaction to meet those metaphysical needs of mankind which are ineradicable, and that it takes the place of pure philosophical truth, which is infinitely difficult, and perhaps never attainable. Philalithes. Yes, pretty much in the same way as a wooden leg takes the place of a natural one. It supplies what is wanting, does very poor service for it, and claims to be regarded as a natural leg, and is more or less cleverly put together. There is a difference, however, for, as a rule, the natural leg was in existence before the wooden one, while religion everywhere has gained the start of philosophy. Timophiles. That may be, but a wooden leg is of great value to those who have no natural leg. You must keep in view that the metaphysical requirements of man absolutely demand satisfaction, because the horizon of his thoughts must be defined and not remain unlimited. A man, as a rule, has no faculty of judgment for weighing reasons and distinguishing between what is true and what is false. Moreover, the work imposed upon him by nature and her requirements leaves him no time for investigations of that kind, or for the education which they presuppose. Therefore, it is entirely out of the question to imagine he will be convinced by reasons. There is nothing left for him but belief and authority. Even if a really true philosophy took the place of religion, at least 9/10 of mankind would only accept it on authority, so that it would be again a matter of belief. For Plato's philosophon plethos adinaton είναι will always hold good. Authority, however, is only established by time and circumstances, so that we cannot bestow it on that which has only reason to commend it. Accordingly, we must grant it only to that which has attained it in the course of history, even if it is only truth represented allegorically. This kind of truth, supported by authority, appeals directly to the essentially metaphysical temperament of man, that is, to his need of a theory concerning the riddle of existence, which thrusts itself upon him and arises from the consciousness that behind the physical in the world there must be a metaphysical, an unchangeable something which serves as the foundation of constant change. It also appeals to the will, fears, and hopes of mortals living in constant need. Religion provides them with gods, demons, to whom they call, appease, and conciliate. Finally, it appeals to their moral consciousness, which is undeniably present, and lends to it that authenticity and support from without, a support without which it would not easily maintain itself in the struggle against so many temptations. It is exactly from this side that religion provides an inexhaustible source of consolation and comfort in the countless and great sorrows of life. A comfort which does not leave man in death, but rather then unfolds its full efficacy, so that religion is like someone taking hold of the hand of a blind person and leading him, since he cannot see for himself. All that the blind person wants is to attain his end, not to see everything as he walks along. Philalithes. This side is certainly the brilliant side of religion. If it is a Phraus, it is indeed a pia Phraus. That cannot be denied. Then priests become something between deceivers and moralists, for they dare not teach the real truth, as you yourself have quite correctly explained, even if it were known to them, which it is not. There can at any rate be a true philosophy, but there can be no true religion. I mean true in the real and proper understanding of the word, not merely in that flowery and allegorical sense which you have described, a sense in which every religion would be true only in different degrees. It is certainly quite in harmony with the inextricable admixture of good and evil, honesty and dishonesty, goodness and wickedness, magnanimity and baseness, which the world presents everywhere, and the most important, the most lofty, and the most sacred truths can make their appearance only in combination with a lie, nay, can borrow strength from a lie, as something that affects mankind more powerfully, and as revelation must be introduced by a lie. One might regard this fact as the monogram of the moral world. Meanwhile, let us not give up the hope that mankind will some day attain that point of maturity and education at which it is able to produce a true philosophy on the one hand, and accept it on the other. Simplex sigillum veri. The naked truth must be so simple and comprehensible that one can impart it to all in its true form, without any admixture of myth and fable, a pack of lies. In other words, without masking it as religion. Demophiles. You have not a sufficient idea of the wretched capacities of the masses. Philalithes. I express it only as a hope, but to give it up is impossible. In that case, if truth were in a simpler and more comprehensible form, it would surely soon drive religion from the position of vicegerent which it has so long held. Then religion will have fulfilled her mission and finished her course. She might then dismiss the race which she has guarded to maturity and herself retire in peace. This will be the euthanasia of religion. However, as long as she lives, she has two faces, one of truth and one of deceit. According as one looks attentively at one or the other, one will like or dislike her. Hence religion must be regarded as a necessary evil, its necessity resting on the pitiful weak-mindedness of the great majority of mankind, incapable of grasping the truth, and consequently, when in extremity, requires a substitute for truth. Demophiles. Really, one would think that you philosophers had truth lying in readiness, and all that one had to do was to lay hold of it. Philalithes. If we have not got it, it is principally to be ascribed to the pressure under which philosophy, at all periods and in all countries, has been held by religion. We have tried to make not only the expression and communication of truth impossible, but even the contemplation and discovery of it, by giving the minds of children in earliest childhood into the hands of priests to be worked upon, to have the groove in which their fundamental thoughts are henceforth to run so firmly imprinted as in principal matters, to become fixed and determined for a lifetime. I am sometimes shocked to see, when I take into my hand the writings of even the most intelligent minds of the 16th and 17th centuries, and especially if I have just left my Oriental studies, how paralyzed and hemmed in all sides they are by Jewish notions. Prepared in this way, one cannot form any idea of the true philosophy. Demophiles. And if, moreover, this true philosophy were discovered, religion would not cease to exist, as you imagine. There cannot be one system of metaphysics for everybody. The natural differences of intellectual power, in addition to those of education, make this impossible. The great majority of mankind must necessarily be engaged in the arduous bodily labor which is requisite in order to furnish the endless needs of the whole race. Not only does this leave the majority no time for education, for learning, or for reflection, but by virtue of the strong antagonism between merely physical and intellectual qualities, much excessive bodily labor blunts the understanding and makes it heavy, clumsy, and awkward, and consequently incapable of grasping any other than perfectly simple and palpable matters. At least 9/10 of the human race comes under this category. People require a system of metaphysics, that is, an account of the world and our existence, because such an account belongs to the most natural requirements of mankind. They require also a popular system of metaphysics, which, in order for it to be this, must combine many rare qualities. For instance, it must be exceedingly lucid, and yet, in the right places, be obscure, nay, to a certain extent, impenetrable. Then a correct and satisfying moral system must be combined with its dogmas. Above everything, it must bring inexhaustible consolation in suffering and death. It follows from this that it can only be true in sensu allegorico and not in sensu proprio. Further, it must have the support of an authority which is imposing by its great age, by its general recognition, by its documents, together with their tone and statements, qualities which are so infinitely difficult to combine that many a man, if he stopped to reflect, would not be so ready to help to undermine a religion, but would consider it the most sacred treasure of the people. If anyone wants to criticize religion, he should always bear in mind the nature of the great masses for which it is destined, and picture to himself their complete moral and intellectual inferiority. It is incredible how far this inferiority goes, and how steadily a spark of truth will continue to glimmer even under the crudest veiling of monstrous fables and grotesque ceremonies, adhering indelibly, like the perfume of musk, to everything which has come in contact with it. As an illustration of this, look at the profound wisdom which is revealed in the Upanishads, and then look at the mad idolatry in the India of today, as is revealed in its pilgrimages, processions, and festivities, or at the mad and ludicrous doings of the sannyasi of the present time. Nevertheless, it cannot be denied that in all this madness and absurdity there yet lies something that is hidden from view, something that is in accordance with or a reflection of the profound wisdom that has been mentioned. It requires this kind of dressing up for the great brute masses. In this antithesis, we have before us the two poles of humanity, the wisdom of the individual and the bestiality of the masses, both of which, however, find their point of harmony in the moral kingdom. Who has not thought of the saying from the chorale, "Vulgar people look like men, but I have never seen anything like them"? The more highly cultured man may always explain religion to himself cum grano salis. The man of learning, the thoughtful mind, may in secret exchange it for a philosophy. And yet one philosophy would not do for everybody. Each philosophy, by the laws of affinity, attracts a public to whose education and mental capacities it is fitted. So there is always an inferior metaphysical system of the schools for the educated plebeians, and a higher system for the elite. Kant's lofty doctrine, for example, was degraded to meet the requirements of the schools, and ruined by Fries, Krug, Zaled, and similar people. In short, Goethe's dictum is as applicable here as anywhere. One does not suit all. Pure belief in revelation and pure metaphysics are for the two extremes, and for the intermediate steps mutual modifications of both in countless combinations and gradations. The immeasurable differences which nature and education place between men have made this necessary. Philalithes. This point of view reminds me seriously of the mysteries of the ancients which you have already mentioned. Their aim at bottom seems to have lain in remedying the evil arising out of the differences of mental capacities and education. Their plan was to single out of the great multitude a few people to whom the unveiled truth was absolutely incomprehensible, and to reveal the truth to them up to a certain point. Then, out of these, they singled out others to whom they revealed more, as they were able to grasp more, and so on up to the epopts. And so we got mikra και μείζωνα και μέγιστα μυστήρια. The plan was based on a correct knowledge of the intellectual inequality of mankind. Demophiles. To a certain extent, the education in our lower, middle, and high schools represents the different forms of initiation into the mysteries. Philalithes. Only in a very approximate way, and this only in so far as subjects of higher knowledge were written about exclusively in Latin. But since that has ceased to be so, all the mysteries are profaned. Demophiles. However that may be, I wish to remind you, in speaking of religion, that you should grasp it more from the practical and less from the theoretical side. Personified metaphysics may be religion's enemy, yet personified morality will be its friend. Perhaps the metaphysics in all religions is false, but the morality in all is true. This is to be surmised from the fact that in their metaphysics they contradict each other, while in their morality they agree. Philalithes. Which furnishes us with a proof of the rule of logic, that a true conclusion may follow from false premises. Demophiles. Well, stick to your conclusion and be always mindful that religion has two sides. If it can't stand when looked at merely from the theoretical, in other words, from its intellectual side, it appears, on the other hand, from the moral side as the only means of directing, training, and pacifying those races of animals gifted with reason, whose kinship with the ape does not exclude a kinship with the tiger. At the same time, religion is, in general, a sufficient satisfaction for their dull metaphysical needs. You appear to me to have no proper idea of the difference, wide as the heavens apart, of the profound breach between your learned man, who is enlightened and accustomed to think, and the heavy, awkward, stupid, and inert consciousness of mankind's beasts of burden, whose thoughts have taken once and for all the direction of fear about their maintenance and cannot be put in motion in any other, and whose muscular power is so exclusively exercised that the nervous power which produces intelligence is thereby greatly reduced. People of this kind must absolutely have something that they can take hold of on the slippery and thorny path of their life, some sort of beautiful fable, by means of which things can be presented to them which their crude intelligence could most certainly only understand in picture and parable. It is impossible to approach them with subtle explanations and fine distinctions. If you think of religion in this way, and bear in mind that its aims are extremely practical and only subordinately theoretical, it will seem to you worthy of the highest respect. Philalithes. A respect which would finally rest on the principle that the end sanctifies the means. However, I am not in favour of a compromise on a basis of that sort. Religion may be an excellent means of curbing and controlling the perverse, dull, and malicious creatures of the biped race. In the eyes of the friend of truth, every frowse, be it ever so pure, must be rejected. It would be an odd way to promote virtue through the medium of lies and deception. The flag to which I have sworn is truth. I shall remain faithful to it everywhere, and regardless of success, I shall fight for light and truth. If I see religion hostile, I shall... Demophiles. But you will not. Religion is not a deception. It is true, and the most important of all truths. But because, as has already been said, its doctrines are of such a lofty nature that the great masses cannot grasp them immediately, because, I say, its light would blind the ordinary eye, does it appear concealed in the veil of allegory, and teach that which is not exactly true in itself, but which is true according to the meaning contained in it, and understood in this way. Religion is the truth. Philalithes. That would be very probable if it were allowed to be true only in an allegorical sense. But it claims to be exactly true, and true in the proper sense of the word. Herein lies a deception, and it is here that the friend of truth must oppose it. Demophiles. But this deception is a conditio sine qua non. If religion admitted that it was merely the allegorical meaning in its doctrines that was true, it would be deprived of all efficacy, and such rigorous treatment would put an end to its invaluable and beneficial influence of the morals and feelings of mankind. Instead of insisting on that with pedantic obstinacy, look at its great achievements in a practical way, both as regards morality and feelings, as a guide to conduct, as a support and consolation to suffering humanity in life and death. How greatly you should guard against rousing suspicion in the masses by theoretical wrangling, and thereby finally taking from them what is an inexhaustible source of consolation and comfort to them, which in their hard lot they need very much more than we do. For this reason alone, religion ought not to be attacked. Philalithes. With this argument, Luther could have been beaten out of the field when he attacked the selling of indulgences. For the letters of indulgence have furnished many a man with irreparable consolation and perfect tranquillity, so that he joyfully passed away with perfect confidence in the little packet of them which he firmly held in his hand, as he lay dying, convinced that in them he had so many cards of admission into all the 9 heavens. What is the use of grounds of consolation and peacefulness over which is constantly hanging the Damocles sword of deception? The truth, my friend, the truth alone holds good, and remains constant and faithful. It is the only solid consolation. It is the indestructible diamond. Demophiles. Yes, if you had truth in your pocket to bless us with whenever we asked for it. But what you possess are only metaphysical systems, in which nothing is certain but the headaches they cost. Before one takes anything away, one must have something better to put in its place. End of section 14.